G'day, this is Chris from the Parx-e here with my very good buddy Mike Altamura, very talented boxing manager and screenwriter. He's finally getting his time today. We're in a very cloudy Greensboro today, but why not? So he's been doing this a while now, so he's finally getting his time to chat today. So let's begin. So boxing, how did you get into it? How did you become a manager?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, how to get into it. My father, he trained the national team a number of times, just before I was born, so sort of late 70s, early 80s. And then he stepped away from the sport, but we always had boxing ingrained in our blood. And gradually, as I got older and older, I'd ask questions. And I actually started as a journalist at 11 years of age with Ray Wheatley's World of Boxing magazine. And I guess the rest is history. I mean, once I was 16, 17, I started working with my first fighters that I was representing, and then just gradually built my company from there.
So you've got a stable of boxers now. How do you find the people you want to work with? Do people send them to you, or do they come to you, or what's the story?
There's an old saying that if you want a beautiful girl, you have to go out and find her. And it's very similar with the athletes too. You know, oftentimes when you have these elite athletes out of the amateurs or even developed professionals, you have to be proactive and go and sign them. That said, in recent times, because I've been able to build a fairly solid reputation over the last 12, 13 years, I've been able to get myself in a position where, say, the elite fighters in Australia are getting to a certain point and then approaching me to represent them. So it's a mix. I mean, there's definitely those that I have to chase. If I see a talent, I identify a talent that I think is a wise investment for the future in the amateurs, or even a developed pro, I'll approach them and discuss representation. But lately it's been the opposite. I've been receiving a lot of calls from kids wanting to join my company.
That's good. So how do you weed out the ones that you know are just going to be flaky from the ones that generally want to do it and really want to make a real go of it?
Well, that's where you have to utilize your instincts. You know, it's an attitude test, and it's something that probably took me the better part of a decade to actually learn how to see the red flags, I suppose. I mean, sometimes nowadays all I have to hear is just one tiny word or one hesitant word from an athlete, you know, when we're in the initial stages of discussing representation, and I know to walk away. Whereas years ago I'd try and see beyond that and think, you know, hey, maybe this can be modified. Now it's just using your judgment and using your own methodology, and whether it turns out or whatever, you stand with conviction by your own decisions.
So you've had problems in the past where you've worked with people and they've just in the end it didn't work and they kind of took advantage of you, but you've learned from that experience and you've learned to put that to knowledge that you sort of have figured out when you know someone they're just not going to be. They know that they're in it for themselves and they don't care if they screw you over in the end of the day.
Well, you know, there's a number of things. First and foremost in life, nothing more is certain than the fact that shit happens, and it's how you deal with it. So everything that happens in your lifetime, you have to utilize that experience and look how to move forward. You know, if you look at the great artists in history and you look at how to create a masterpiece, you learn how to create a masterpiece from your mistakes. You better yourself from your mistakes, and then you utilize that knowledge to perfect your craft. And that's the way I perceive the sport. And yeah, there's been deals that I've come out on the raw end of them, but I've always emerged a smarter and better person. Whether it's a more humble person, whether it's smarter business-wise, whether it's that I know how to identify certain characteristics within athletes, or just in terms of, you know, say if I get someone and they get to a world championship, how to have the right surroundings and the right individuals around them so that they stay grounded as well.
Cool. So how do you know when you get approached, one of your athletes, they get approached to do a fight, how do you know if the fight is right for them to do?
That's where I utilize, you know, my knowledge. That's where I have to work harder than anyone else, because I've got to be familiar with, you know, the top adversaries within our respective weight classes. I have to do my due diligence and do research on the opponents. And, you know, sometimes when you're dealing at preliminary level, like 4-6 round level fights, it's very, very hard to find footage. It's very hard to find information on the opponents. So sometimes You know, you just do your research as best you can. You rely on the teams you work with, and that's the main thing. Like, I'm guided essentially by the trainers I work with. The trainers are the ones who are there every day with the athletes. So it's imperative that I have trainers I believe in and trainers whom I trust. So they'll give me indications, whether there's styles that my fighters find to be particularly difficult, or, you know, styles they know they handle. We'll discuss it and then make a decision as a team.
So how do you deal with when, like, you're helping out Mundine with his latest fight, and then he suddenly has an injury? How does that affect you when you want this really great fighter, and then in the last minute, in the case of Mundine, he had an injury? How does that affect you? Does it annoy you as a bit of a problem, or?
Well, I mean, in terms of his particular case, he suffered a perforated eardrum upon arriving in the United States, and we're looking to have that bout rescheduled 8 weeks. But, you know, how it affects me, if the fight isn't rescheduled, if Austin Trout's team decide to go in another direction, essentially months of hard work just falls by the wayside. So whatever I was due to earn that particular night, you can say adios to it. And that's another lesson I've learned over the years, is never to count your money until it's in your hand.
So how do you know if a promoter's on the up and up and they're straight with you in terms of making sure that payment is paid? You've obviously must have problems in the past where they're not doing their job right because they've put this great fight together, but no one turns up.
Of course, and you know, it's. I remember years ago, I have a good chat with. It's actually one of the heads of WBO Asia Pacific, Danny Lee, and I have great chats with him all the time. Where I remember years ago, you know, when we were younger. Of course, I'm about a decade younger than him. Would always talk about, you know, hey, we need new promoters in the sport. We need opportunities. Maybe they'll give us opportunities. Nowadays, I realise that, you know, I almost take that step back when someone first comes in as a promoter, and I want to see how they handle dealing with everybody else. Once I see that they've got a little bit of, you know, water under the bridge and that they're reliable, then I'll start working with them. So, again, it's back to what I was saying earlier, the character test with people. But you need to take a little bit of a leap of faith and hope that people will be right to you as well.
Cool. So, screenwriting, that's completely different from boxing.
That keeps me sane.
So how did you get into that?
Good question. Absolutely self-taught. I remember it was around the time of the Sydney Olympics. So I would have been like 17 at the time, and I was watching Cheers non-stop around the clock, which is, you know, probably out of the Charles brothers, sort of Cheers, Taxi, Frasier, you know, amongst their wings, they're amongst my favourite sitcoms. So anyways, you know, having that bravado of youth, I suppose, I figured that, you know, I could write the next great sitcom. So I set upon piecing one together myself, and of course it was atrociously bad, and the writing was atrociously predictable. But that kind of set it in my head that was a path I wanted to head down in future. And then, like I said earlier too, I was starting to get established as a journalist in my teens. Went to university, earned my Bachelor of Journalism, and never really thought much of doing cinema or anything at university. But once I graduated, that's when I revisited the screenwriting. And like I was saying just before, it's been a great outlet for me. It really, really does balance my life.
So when you're writing a screenplay, how does an idea get into your head?
That's a good question. I mean, you know what? It usually just comes off a premise. You know, like there'll be an initial premise, and then you brainstorm and grow from there. And the premise has to stay strong. And then, so you basically you come up with your concept, you see whether it's tangible, you see whether it's been done in the market before or whatever. You know, I love it when everyone always comes up to me and says, oh, I've got the best idea for a film. But a log line, you know, a two-line premise for a film is one thing, but it's creating the bare bones around it. It's creating the beginning, the middle, and the end, and so on and so forth, and then ensuring that you've got all your story arcs fleshed out. So that's usually where most of my premises will fall by the wayside. Although, you know, I'll usually work on 3 or 4 at a time, and if I see one has more promise, then that's the one I'll pursue.
Cool. So, what's your go-to movie that you always have to go back and watch for inspiration? Or just the fact you just love it and you just love watching it time and time again?
That's a great question. Rocky. Absolute classic. So I always go back to Rocky. It's funny because these movies don't necessarily have critical acclaim, but they're my go-to movies. Can't Buy Me Love with Patrick Dempsey, which is a teen comedy. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which was the writing debut of Cameron Crowe, right? And Amy Heckerling as a director. So to me, that's very much a hidden classic in the early 80s. I love comedies, but films like Good Will Hunting to me I find very inspirational. They're usually my go-to kind of films. American Pie. Like I was saying, the majority of the films I go back to, it's funny because I'm a screenwriter. Everyone's like, but when you need to feel inspired, don't you go and watch Shawshank Redemption? I was like, no, man, that feels like a long night to me. I know that's 3.5 hours of my time, by after you take your breaks and go bathroom, whatever, and it's a physically draining movie to watch. So no, when I'm trying to get in the mindset, I need something that makes me laugh, something that makes me feel upbeat. Is there
such thing as not a bad 80s teen movie?
I don't know about that, because if you've seen Hot Times at Montclair High, you know that's horrendous. And there's another one, Spring Break USA, amongst the worst teen movies I've ever seen. So I don't necessarily know if that's true, but if you come out of even all the John Hughes movies, from the Breakfast Club to the rest of them, all great entertaining films, very wholesome films. Obviously Porky's, so on and so forth. So many classic teen movies. Even the Screwball series, as much as they were pretty lowbrow, were very, very entertaining films.
So I will leave you with one more question.
Sure.
So what is next for Mike Altamura and what he does with boxing and screenwriting?
World domination, baby. But no, just keep enjoying my life. Keep enjoying the opportunities and the people I work with, and just keep moving forward, and never forgetting where I came from more than anything, which is these mean streets of Greensboro.
Nice. Perfect.